So John, first of all, thank you for agreeing to do this video for the students at Waterloo today. What I'd like to do first is to ask you just to say a few words about yourself, to give some background to the students.
Well, Peter, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I started my working life as an electrical engineer, but I got into the computer field quite early on as a systems programmer, sort of sleeves rolled up, bits and bytes stuff, but that, of course, back in the day when it was just mainframes. And I moved through some management positions and came over to Canada actually as a consultant. And then I worked as a consultant and then also at some of the big companies like one of the banks, actually a couple of the banks, in management positions in IT. And then my career took a complete shift and I went into the publishing business. Well, I guess it wasn't a complete shift in as much as my focus remained information technology, and the magazines that I was involved with were published for IT professionals in Canada. So I have remained very closely involved with the professional community, and then in my more recent years, in particular with the IT executive community in Canada.
Thanks, John. And so we're going to talk today about information technology and the business. And the first question I've got for you is, do you think that IT can play a strategic role in organizations today? And do you think that's changed over the time that you've been observing the industry?
Well, yes, I think it can. And I suppose I should declare a bias. I have, of course, been in the information technology field one way or another for many years, and so I am a believer. But if you think about how information technology has evolved, or at least its use in the enterprise over the years, I think it's a good way to see how it has become a strategic tool in the business arsenal. So if you go back to, as I say, when I first got into the business, it was strictly mainframes, and information technology was applied to really back office functions like accounting and payroll and so on. In the 80s, we saw the influence of the personal computer as it entered the enterprise, and that gave access to a greater range of people within companies to the information that was stored in the mainframes. So sort of the combination of PCs and basic local area networking enabled a broader range of knowledge workers to access information that helped them do their jobs. So in a sense, the application of information technology had moved a step further from the back room towards where the company's business is really conducted, that is with customers and business partners. And then, of course, more recently we saw the internet, the World Wide Web, be integrated into the broader network opportunities for companies. And so what we've now seen in the more recent past is the application of information technologies really right at the front lines of the business, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, actually involved in relating to customers and business partners. So it has gotten much more closely aligned with what happens with the business. And so with the advent of, or rather it's not new, but it's starting to be exploited more and more as business intelligence, data analysis. So with the vast amounts of data that's being generated by these interactions with customers and business partners, companies are now applying business intelligence techniques to understanding what that information means, and starting to build business strategies around that. So I think it's the fact that information technology is applied much closer to where the business interacts with the world at large, where it makes its money, and also the ability of information technology to provide insights into information that's stored in the business that wasn't possible before. Both of those things enable companies to make much better business decisions. So to that extent, certainly it's a strategic tool.
How effectively do you think companies are integrating information technology in their business strategy today, John? You've talked about the possibilities that there are. How effective are companies at it?
I think most companies are moving in the right direction, and not unexpectedly, some are doing a better job than others. If you look at the statistics, some of the most successful companies are in fact those companies that are using information technology most effectively. Examples like, well, the banks have always used technology effectively. It's almost important to them as the business that they're in. Companies like Walmart, where they apply technology throughout their organization. And you'll see in companies like that where they're very successful and their information technology strategies are right up in the C-level suite. That's where you're going to see chief information officers, the head of technology, actually being part of the business decision-making group, the executive team. So I think it varies, and it varies also a little bit by the industry that you're in. I think companies that are very resource intensive, like the energy companies, they tend to be far more focused on the operational sides of their business in terms of their priorities. So, when the price of oil changes, it has a much greater impact on the bottom line of an energy company than information technology is likely to have. So if you look it might be an interesting exercise to try. If you look on the websites of major companies, particularly those in the energy sector, you'll find very few chief information officers listed among their executive team. Where if you look at organizations like banks, financial companies, you'll commonly see the chief information officer listed along with other executives as part of the executive team.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about the role of a chief information officer, John, and how widespread they are in business today?
I think the role of any executive is to understand how the business makes money and focus the efforts of that line of business or functional area to help the company build strategies that conform with that objective. That how do they make money? And I think that's true of any executive, including the executives who are in charge of information technology. So, for example, the chief financial officer's role is to understand how the business makes money and to manage the financial affairs of the company, not only to maintain the financial health of the company, but also to utilize those finances to contribute to that overall business objective of how to make money, or whatever it is that the business is intended to do, whether it's to make money, whether it's to, in a non-profit area, to support a particular area of endeavor. So likewise, a marketing executive, their job is to understand how the business makes money and to apply the resources, the skills and capabilities of the marketing organization to helping the company make their money better, more effectively. Likewise, then, the chief information officer, the most senior IT executive, their role is to understand how the business makes money and focus the skills and resources of information technology to not just supporting those goals, but helping define those goals. So helping executive team understand how to apply technology to be more innovative, to add value to the business.
So, what skills does a CIO need to be able to manage the relationship between the IT and the business? What should the students be thinking about as areas that they need to learn a bit if they're going to progress in organizations?
Yeah, I think the short answer is that a chief information officer needs the same set of basic skills that any executive needs. And over and above that, it's my opinion that they need to have a fairly solid grounding in technology. There is some debate around that, and there are certainly examples of CIOs who did not actually come from an information technology background, but rather came from some line of business. But I believe most of those, where they're successful, have actually been far more engaged with technology than is typical of executives today, or non-IT executives. So all the same skills that an executive needs in any line of business, communication skills, people management skills. Communications, interestingly, comes out almost the topmost skill identified by CIOs themselves in terms of what is required to be successful. Obviously, people skills, the ability to persuade. One of the things that the CIO has to do is sort of bridge that divide between information technology, or the information technology organization, and the business executives. And so part of that job is to build that relationship between the two, and relationships are built between people, not organizations. So be able to interact with the other business executives in a way that gains their respect and provides you the ability to persuade and get them on side with whatever it is you're trying to do on behalf of the business.
How well do you think, on the whole, business people understand the contribution that IT can make?
I think that varies too, and I got to believe it's improving. But for the most part, I don't think non-IT business people have quite as much understanding of information technology and its role within their line of business, how it impacts, how it can be employed. I don't think they have as much understanding as they should. One of the frustrating aspects that I hear from a lot of CIOs is that, they've been berated for quite a lot of years, not unfairly, to learn how to speak to the business. They've not done a good job of that in the past, but that's changed a lot over time. And I think today any CIO that has a chance of success is well able to understand and articulate issues in business terms. But I don't think the same is necessarily true of non-IT business people. And one of the complaints I hear from CIOs is that oftentimes when issues arise within a business that look like they have a technology element to them, they kind of throw that problem over the wall. Oh, that's a technology problem, give it to the CIO, rather than engaging with the CIO in a dialogue that would help both of them contribute to addressing either that problem or that opportunity in a way that takes advantage of both the business know-how of that business executive and the IT know-how of the CIO. So I think it's improving, but I don't think business people. If I were going to take an MBA course today, I have ambitions to go through a more senior roles in business, I would probably shun any MBA program that didn't have an IT component today. I think IT is just that important to the business. And I think that's starting to happen.
So as you observe the skills that people have who are taking up IT roles in organisations today, what would you say were their strengths and weaknesses, and what should people be learning at university and college that they're not?
I think this first basic one applies to all fields, not just information technology. I hear a lot of business people complain, including IT people, that the graduates coming out of school today don't have the strength of writing skills that's really required of business, don't have the communication skills, and in many cases, and of course, this is by no means going to apply to everybody. It's a generalization, and as with all generalizations, there are exceptions, but the generalization I hear is that communication skills are relatively poor, and their ability to work in teams. A lot of them are great at working on their own and being self-motivated, but among the things that are important in a business environment is the ability to work in teams, and that's one of the things that they're lacking. I was associated some years back with a magazine that I really wish had survived. It didn't, but it was called Graduate Computer World, and its intent was to help graduates who were going into an information technology field, going through computer sciences, help them understand what to expect when they got into business. And I think it's really important, because I do believe a lot of people have a false impression, and so they get surprised when they enter the workforce by some of the things that are true of a business environment. But in the process of publishing that magazine, we used to talk to a lot of people who were in the workforce but relatively recently. So a graduate from computer science who's been working in a business for perhaps a year, and we'd go and interview them while their university experience was still fresh in their mind, and while their entry into the workforce was still fresh in their mind, and ask them exactly the question you're asking me: what are the kinds of things they wish they had learned before they got into the workforce? And the number one answer from most of them was, I wish I'd have taken maybe a Psych 1 or something like that, a course that would help me understand human behavior and help me be better at human relationships. And another one that I think particularly, if you think back to some of the comments we've already discussed, Peter, about the role of business people and the greater need today to understand information technology and how it applies to their own lines of business, then I think some basic information technology courses for non-IT, people with business ambitions, but for IT people, I think also basic economics and business courses that will give them at least a foundation understanding of how business works. So those are the kinds of things I would hope to see people doing alongside their majors in university.
Thank you, John. And so on the same theme, how do you see the future role of information technology people in organizations developing? Is that going to change in the near future?
I think it is changing. Has always been changing slowly. And in keeping with my earlier comments about how information technology is getting closer to the real issues of business, it's actually becoming more and more integrated into the business, as it should. I think then we're going to start to see roles evolving that combine both business and information technology. So, business analysts sort of are one manifestation of that today, where they work closely with some line of business, and but they have a foot in the information technology organization and bridge that gap. sort of translating the needs of business into information technology strategies or tactics, if you will. So I think we'll start to see some of that. The other thing I think we'll see in some respects is a greater distinction between those people who build applications and those people who apply information technology to the needs of business. And so it's likely to happen, and is in fact happening today, with things like cloud computing enabling organizations to take advantage of compute resources that are not residing within the organization, and then facilities management in the cloud or otherwise, where a complete other organization, a third party, is managing the information infrastructure. Then what resides then within the company is the ability to apply information technology to the needs of the business, rather than the management of the hardware and software components of information technology. So I think that the need for information technology management will always be there within an organization, but the need to actually support and manage the pieces of hardware, the bits and bytes and networks and so on, that may well be something that can be put out to third parties. And of course today already is being done that way for a lot of businesses.
Thanks. And so my final question, John, which I try to ask everyone I interview, is whether you have any words of advice for the students as they embark on their working careers.
I think for students who have not gone through the sort of co-op type of program where you're already exposed to, if you will, the real world of business, if indeed it is real while you're a co-op student. But for anybody else, it's likely that the world that you enter in a company is going to be somewhat different than the one you've experienced. And there can be some surprises that aren't so enjoyable, particularly for information technology people who when they get into a large company will find that things move rather more slowly than they've been used to and perhaps than they'd like. And so a degree of patience, I think, is needed. And I think it takes somebody quite grown up to be able to look at the environment they've joined, view those things that they find frustrating and look at them and say, okay, why is this the way it is? Rather than simply railing at it, try and understand why it is. Building an application in a large enterprise like a bank is very different from building an application to run on an iPhone to do your personal finances or something like that. There are security issues that don't exist in the personal world, and those kinds of things tend to slow things down. And of course, there also with a large organization, there's a need to be able to harmonize the efforts of everybody within it, and that has a tendency to slow down what happens to each, what happens within each little area of the business. So it can feel like things are slow, and so you have patience, understanding, and then there are skills that I think today's graduates bring into the workplace that don't currently exist there. I'm thinking in terms of things like social media and the ability to use it. You and I, Peter, we've been around a little while, and we're reasonably smart. We've learned and are able to make use of social media, and I know that you do in many different ways. But we had to learn how to do that. We didn't sort of grow up with it. Whereas the people who are joining the workforce today have had access to technology, have been using social media almost as a second nature. And so their understanding of how to take advantage of it is in many ways advanced over the people already in the workforce. And so I think they can bring that knowledge and help help people within the workforce, the older people, take better advantage of social media, but they have to be sensitive as well, because of course they're the newbies, and it's not always easy as an older person to take the advice of a younger person. So there's a social skill they need too, tact and diplomacy.
Well, thanks very much for talking to the students today, John. I know they're going to find of value what you've had to say, and it's been a pleasure.
For me too. Thank you, Peter. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, John.